Welcome to the Shift Method Podcast. I'm your host, Coach D. My goal is to shift the culture of health and fitness through evidence-based coaching and engaging content for the public and health fitness professionals alike. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope y'all enjoy this episode.
What's good, everyone? Coach D here with the Shift Method Podcast. Hope y'all are having a wonderful day. This is going to be episode number 51 of the podcast. As you're watching, you see, I ain't got a guest here today. Y'all know that we got a fitness and health Q&A here. This is going to be fitness and health Q&A number 4 on the podcast here. So how it works every month or two, I kind of put out on Instagram story if y'all want to ask any questions related to fitness and health. And this is my opportunity to answer it for y'all. We got 4 awesome questions here today that I'm going to go through in just a moment. As always, let y'all know what's going on. We're kind of in the midway through September here. So in a couple weeks, we got that newsletter for October coming out. If you want to get all the content summed up, special offers, what's going on in my life and with the Shift Method, be sure to check that out. You can subscribe to the newsletter by heading to theshiftmethod.org. It'll pop up a little icon for you to just go ahead, put in your name and email, and you'll be all set. If you're looking to train with me in person, I do have a couple spots open in the mornings. I'm again at Johnny O's Gymnasium, Boca Raton, South Florida. So if you're in the area, you're looking to train, would love the opportunity to work with you. Just message me on Instagram or on my website, theshiftmethod.org. Click any of those take action buttons and I'll get back to you. And you already know your boy got info on the socials. We got daily content on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube Shorts, as well as the weekly YouTube style and Spotify style videos coming out. But that's enough of terms of the updates that I got for y'all. Again, this is episode number 51, Fitness and Health Q&A number 4. And we're going to go ahead and get right into y'all's questions. So let's get started with number 1 here. So first question is, what is your favorite and least favorite exercise and why? So I split this up into 2 different ways. I have cardio and I have resistance training. So we'll make those distinctions there. For cardio, this one's easy. If y'all know me, I love playing basketball. So basketball is definitely my favorite. In terms of why it's my favorite, I can't really say. I guess, it's fast paced, it's team based. It involves you playing multiple positions. So you're not just doing either just offense or just defense. You get to do a little bit of both. It's very reactionary. It's very explosive sport, which I like to run and jump. Get your heart rate up, which I really like, that challenge that I have in my cardiovascular system. So yeah, it's a fun thing for me overall. It's very engaging. So basketball is going to be my favorite thing I like to do from a cardiovascular standpoint. Least favorite, man. Sorry if you like this, man. It's the elliptical. I actually like to run. I don't mind the assault bike or sleds or circuits. Even the Stairmaster, man, I'll tolerate that. Elliptical, there's something about it. It's just, I do not enjoy the motion of it. It gets quite annoying. It's not painful, but it's just kind of tedious for me. So it's kind of my least favorite go-to type of cardio that I do. So sorry, elliptical, but it is what it is. On the resistance training side, in terms of my favorite, I will say this does fluctuate depending on what kind of training I'm doing, how I'm feeling. But right now, I got to admit, I got this exercise in my block now, and I've been freaking loving it. I come back to it every now and again, man, but it's the barbell back squat. It's so good. When squats feel right, when they're grooving well and you're moving, you actually feel activation in the places you're supposed to, like your quads, your hamstrings, and your glutes. Man, it's a great exercise. I'm enjoying it so much. I have it for my quad development as one of my starting exercises, and I haven't done them specifically. I've done Smith machine squats, I've done safety bar squats, and I've been doing a lot of leg press. So barbell back squats have kind of been on the back burner for a while now, and I just reincorporated them, and man, do they feel good. So barbell back squats, that's my go-to right now. They feel really good for my quads. My least favorite, this one doesn't really change because this exercise I've just hated this thing probably since like undergrad when I tried it. And that's incline dumbbell flies. For me, it's one of those exercises I think, everyone, whether it's your anatomy, just your physiology, whatever it is, the way you're like biomechanically set up, there's just certain exercises that don't work for people, man. And I overall feel pretty good with most exercises. This is one that every single time I've done it, no matter the weight I use, the form I do, doesn't matter what I do, I always feel weird, and I feel it directly in my shoulder joint. And I've actually had minor tweaks in my shoulders a couple of times from doing this exercise. Could it be me? It's possible, But I think there's just something about the mechanics of it with my body, my arms, that it just does not like me. So incline dumbbell flies, probably haven't done them since 2015. And I have no, I have no inspiration or I have no reason to do them anymore. So, yeah, they can kick rocks for all I care. So that's my favorite and least favorite exercises for cardio and for resistance training. All right. Next question we got here. Can you gain muscle and lose fat at the same time? This is a tricky one. The short answer is, like a lot of things I say, it depends. So if you're relatively new to training, as we talked about before on this podcast before, you can have a lot of what's called newbie gains or novice gains, where everything great just happens for you. You gain muscle, you lose fat, you get stronger, you look better, you feel better. It's like all these amazing things for about 6 months, sometimes to even a year, just go your way because the adaptation or the response to the training is just so new to you that you have these immense benefits that come quite quickly for you. And that's why people get really inspired a lot if they stick with training for a few months, because a lot of great things happen to them over a relatively short period of time. However, what we see is that once you kind of get past this newbie gains phase, and again, it fluctuates from person to person depending on your consistency, the type of training you're doing, your genetics, among other factors, there will come a point where it will be very, very difficult to consistently gain muscle while also consistently losing body fat. The reason for that is because in order to gain muscle mass, and not just talking about like the proportion of muscle mass, more so talking about actually putting on physical pounds of muscle, is going to require generally a caloric surplus at some point once you get past the novice phase of training. Well, the tricky part there is when you do have a caloric surplus, of course, with proper training, nutrition, cardiorespiratory training, all those factors into account, you can, of course, put on a good portion of your weight as muscle. But it will never be 100% muscle. As you gain weight, some of it, of course, is going to be body fat and water weight. And so, yes, I do recommend once you've kind of gone past that novice phase, you want to kind of do a cycling of what you would call bulking, cutting, and maintenance. So, for example, let's say, you've been training for about 6 months. You're starting to hit some plateaus, even though you check your training, your nutrition, your sleep, everything's good. But you're like, man, I kind of feel like I've maximized my aesthetics and the amount of muscle I can pack on while maintaining what I have. And let's say you're in a good body composition, right? Your BMI, waist circumference, body fat are all healthy ranges for you. It would be a good idea for you to now start keeping your training difficult, making sure your sleep is good, but now start incorporating a little bit of a surplus calories wise to pack on more materials or give your body more resources to then develop more muscle mass. But of course, again, it's not going to be a 100% conversion of muscle. It's going to vary widely across people, and some of it will be body fat and water. Then once you gain a couple pounds or you get to a weight that you feel comfortable at, then what you're going to do is you're going to go into a little bit of a caloric deficit to try and trim off some of that body fat and water and maintain and hold on as much muscle as you can. You may lose a tiny bit in the process, but the hope is where you started, then you bulked up, and then you cut back down, is that you get to a similar weight or a little heavier and have maintained more muscle mass than what you originally started at. So it's this gradual process of, building up, maybe have a little bit of maintenance, chisel down, and then repeat. And although you have kind of these ebbs and flows and maybe your body fat or your muscle mass, et cetera, if you look at the graph over time, you still have kind of this linear trend upwards in which your body fat is going down or maybe staying the same, and your muscle mass over time is getting larger. So again, TLDR, newbie, yes, you can probably see benefits in both ways, but as you get more advanced, it probably makes more sense to pick one over the other if you truly want to maximize your hypertrophy or in general, cut your body fat percentage without cutting out too much muscle at the same time. Next question. We talked about this one quite a bit actually in some posts, and this is, what is better for gaining muscle mass? Lifting heavy weights for less reps or lighter weights for high reps? What we talk about when it comes to hypertrophy, so building muscle mass, is that the key factors that we have to think about are as follows. Volume, we'll call that hard sets, right? Sets that are close to failure. Intensity, using failure as that context or close to failure, reps in reserve of 0 to 4 for most of your working sets. Hitting each major muscle group at least twice, so frequency. And then other factors like time under tension, controlling the eccentric, making sure the range of motion, the eccentric is good, diet, nutrition, sleep, all those factors as well for the recovery status are also going to be very important for stimulating hypertrophy. Now, specifically on the heavy versus light and higher versus lower reps, we see that you can actually achieve hypertrophy with a wide rep range. The thing that matters, of course, is how much work is going to be done that rep range. Let me give you 2 examples. Of course, with hypertrophy, like we said, hard sets, volume is important. You want that to go up over time. And training close to failure is important, meaning you want to have reps in reserve of 0 to 4. So in this theoretical example, could I gain muscle mass if I did, 10 sets of a 1 rep max, meaning I did 10 sets. Let's use bench press as an example, 10 sets of bench press at 1 rep with an RIR of 0. Could that potentially stimulate some hypertrophy? I guess the technical answer is going to be yeah, in some contexts, but think about how inefficient that is. Think about the fatigue factor. Think about potential injury risk because of that stimulus to fatigue ratio. Think about how, the amount of time that's going to take. So how just generally inefficient that's going to be at actually targeting your chest. And again, to me, this is where I think in my podcast I did with Elias, where I think time under tension is kind of a proxy to volume, where I think just doing 1 rep is not going to be enough time under the bar to actually elicit a hypertrophic response. Because really you're only doing, if you're doing 10 sets of 1, that's 10 reps in total. And even though the proximity to failure is high and the volume, the hard sets is high, 10 sets at an RIR of 0, I don't think it's enough to stimulate, or if it does, it's just a very inefficient way to stimulate volume and ultimately hypertrophy. On the flip side, let's say I did sets of 100, right? So let's say I'm doing bicep curls for 100, right? It's arm day. It's CT Fletcher style workout here, right? We're doing, easy bar curls. And so I'm doing a set of 100, and by somehow I know exactly when to hit 100 and it'll be an RIR of 0. Well, is that going to be beneficial? Again, theoretically, yes. But to me, the time, the exhaustion, the stimulus to fatigue, having to move that much, I feel like it's going to be more exhausting just to be there on your body and supporting structures than actually it is on your biceps to get that movement. And so those are kind of 2 extremes to paint a picture of, while theoretically those hard sets can match up, I don't think makes sense more so to do kind of those extremes of rep ranges where you have very heavy and very light. That's why the general recommendation, which I think plays into a role with time under tension, is about that 6 to 20, or sometimes where you read 30 rep range, where, hey, let's just say 6 to 20, I do 5 sets of 6 on bench press and versus 5 sets of 12 on bench press. If the proximity to failure is similar, I would expect similar results. And so should you lift heavier or lighter? I think if you stay within that rep range, can you flirt in and out of it here and there? Of course, for small things, like if you do sets of 5 or 4, I think you could still have some hypertrophic responses, but I wouldn't make all my chest training or all my leg training sets of 4 or sets of 3, just like wouldn't make all my training sets of 20, 30, 40 plus. I would keep it within that 6 to 20 range, make sure the volume is, going up over time. My hard sets are going up over time, about 10 to 20 hard sets per muscle group per week. And of course, I make sure I got my recovery factors down pat to really help stimulate some muscle growth. And that's a good question. And then the last one we got here, is it bad if my knees go past my toes during a squat? This is another one that I've talked about before, but it's a myth that always seems to come up and doesn't die. So the knees past toes during a squat thing kind of came up actually from a Duke study that was done, I believe, back in the 70s. And so basically what happened is they did some research on torque mechanics and as well as torque and shearing forces on the knee joint. And what they found is that when the knees go past the toes at that point in the movement of the squat, those forces went up quite significantly compared to if they didn't. And so the thought at the time was that, high torque, which is rotational, high shearing, which is kind of this grinding or sliding motion. Because of that, it's probably going to be negative on the knee joint health, and therefore you should avoid it. However, what that study failed to mention is they also measured the hip torque and shearing forces at the hip joint in the squat. And they measured it when you did not let your knees go past toes, so almost doing like a sit back squat or think like if you did like a Smith machine squat where you like had your feet far forward and you let your hips drop down to where your knees don't really go past your toes. When you don't let your knees go past your toes, the torque and shearing on your hips goes up drastically. And so to me, this is funny because it's one of those controversial things that just happen. It's like, well, if I go past my toes, it seems to be bad for my knees, quote unquote. And if I don't go past my toes, it seems to be bad in my hips, quote unquote. And so what it seems that we've learned from biomechanics at this point is just because forces are high, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. What it means is that we may just need to gradually progress ourselves for our body to deal with those forces. And for most people, biomechanically, once you get to a certain range of motion, your knee is going to go past your toe and does need to in order for you to hit depth in your squat. Look at some of these Olympians when they do, the power clean or the snatch or even just competitive powerlifting. You'll see most people are going to get their knee past their toes once they get near the 90-degree mark or deeper. And that is normal and that is good because it helps you control better range of motion. It is huge for quad activation and engagement during the lift. So there's nothing wrong with it at all. These studies that looked at forces, whether it's torque or shearing forces, again, does it show that there's higher torque at certain movements? Yes, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's a bad thing so long as the body is adapted to it. And those are all the questions, y'all. I appreciate y'all for those who sent them in. Y'all know who you are. Thank you so much. And y'all know I do this every couple of months. So I'm sure we'll have another one probably towards the end of the year here. Again, this is episode number 51 of the Shift Method Podcast. Be sure to check out all the socials. If you enjoyed this, be sure to leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe. Don't forget, we got the merch still out. So if you want to cop some, head to theshiftmethod.org, click the store tab. I would appreciate y'all for doing that. Thank y'all again so much. Hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Later.